Please turn to 2 Timothy chapter 3. This morning in Sunday school, we looked at Deuteronomy 34, and we looked at the end of Moses' life and the tender moment that it was and the relationship that he had with God. And today we're going to look at something else. We saw this morning how God loved his servants and how God brought Moses home. And last night I was trying to study, and I just was talking to Mark about it earlier. Sometimes it's just easier to come up with a lesson than other times. And as I was struggling, and start one and just nope, that ain't it, and just move on. I felt like I was trying too hard. I was trying to do something. And there's so many distractions in our lives, whether it's phones, computers, or TV. We can be our own distraction. Our family can be a distraction to us at times. I mean, there's just a lot of things that can distract us, especially when we're trying to focus. And I was thinking, I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of doubt at times about things that go on a daily basis. In our world, what I see on the news, the times that we're living in. And so I just call this lesson is called Facing the Issue. And I don't know how far we'll get today, but we're just gonna get in the Word and see where it goes. In 2 Timothy 3 and verse 1, it says, "This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come." Every generation, we were talking after morning service, every generation that's came, I believe, even when Paul was here on earth preaching, they were looking for the coming or the return of Jesus Christ. And every generation that's come up has said, we're in the end times. How many preachers have you heard talk about, you see the signs, you see the signs. And here we are in 2019, and we're saying the same thing, or at least we're looking for it. And we know we're closer. Just on a timeline, we can prove that we're closer than they were. But I think we can look around and see things, and we're like, well, things still got to come to pass, but it's knocking on the door, And in verse 1, it says perilous times. It's dangerous days. And the Bible talks about an apostate and about apostasy, and we're not going to get into that too much today. But the word perilous means danger. It means full of risk. It's a high risk. It's riskful times at the end. And I believe in our country right now, we're probably not in the riskful times as of yet. But man, we can see the writing on the wall. An apostasy is an abandonment of belief or law. So an apostate is that person who has abandoned God. Okay. Now I'm going to go a little bit further and give you my idea on this. A true apostate is probably a believer who has turned their back on beliefs, who's out. Maybe we would call it backslidden, but it goes a little further because it goes on for a long time. There's also an idea that I have of an apostate not even being a believer, but someone who has godly morals and godly character who has run from that. Okay. And so if we think about the perilous times, we've seen people that have been in church turn and run out and do things that they shouldn't. Lifetime given to God, threw it all away, and are now just doing what they want, when they want, how they want to do it. We've seen people that probably aren't going to church that much, but have abandoned godly values. And so I don't want it to be a gloomy message, but God had flipped over an hourglass, or the sands of time, however you want to look at it. time that only God knows, and the bottom of the glass is filling up. There's not too much sand, I believe, on the top. Now, this is just me talk. I can't prove it. But I do believe God said at this time I'm coming back. And I believe it's soon. I'm not a prophet. I'm not a date setter. It's not my right to know or to set a date. I can't get in the word and put together the meaning of numbers and say, I predict at this time Jesus Christ is going to return to the earth. God knows. He knows, as he's chosen his people, he knows when that last person, when he gives them salvation, that you think about that thought, that one person, and then what? Here comes Jesus. He knows that last person. That's a thought. It's not our right to know, but we are to be observers. We're to be looking for the return, and we're to be students of the word. And if you're doing those three things, then you're going to look around and you're going to say, well, perilous times are here. At least we think they are, okay? I think we, and I'm going to say mankind, people who call themselves Christians, get it backwards. We're not out to save the world. That's God's job, if that's God's will. It's God's the one doing the saving, not man, not the people. We're just a vessel, That's God's thing. The gospel is not intended to save mankind or civilization from wreckage. Think about that. It's not intended to save you from a wicked life. It does. The gospel is intended to save men from the wreckage of mankind, from an eternity separated from God. So if you're here today, this afternoon, and you're saved, it is the goal to see how to handle it in time, these perilous times, what to look for, how to act. If you're here and you're lost and you hear these words today, you need to understand that this earth is not going to be here forever. Jesus Christ is going to come back. I cannot tell you when, but he will come back. And if you're lost and you die lost, this is the best you will ever live. If you're in here and you're saved, this is the worst you will ever live. God has promised us that in his word. I was talking to Matt earlier, and we were talking about, I don't know how we got off on it. I'll put it to you the way I heard it. There's people that are saved, that God has saved, that aren't in God's churches. Okay? But the way it was taught to me growing up is there's nothing wrong going first class, being saved and being in one of God's churches. But that comes with both things, and when you have both combined, it comes with a great responsibility. And not even a responsibility, it's a personal one because of how you live, how you raise your children, but how you look at the end. If we're looking at these perilous days and we're in panic like everybody else, what are we showing them that we have that they don't? Okay? We have to be different. We have to thrive, not just survive perilous days. Not meaning it's going to be easy, not as of our own nature or will. It's what God's going to do. We are to live for God, pointing at him our entire life. On good days, when you're having great health, praise God. On bad days, when you're hurting, praise God. We're facing a kind of darkness all around us in our country that I don't think we've seen before. And like I said, it's not intended to be a doomsday lesson. I don't want to leave you on a negative thought today, but it's not a time for panic for the saved. For the saved, I believe, and we get this wrong, I believe there's never a time for panic. But we do. God never panics. Think about that. Nothing ever surprises God. He's never like, oh, I forgot to do. I didn't pick up. Never happens. That God loved us, and as we saw this morning, undeservingly, by the way he treated Moses, and yet we panic on him, and we try to do stuff. We try to have something to do with it. So I look around and I think of our youth, and I think of what they've want. I think of our youth in this church, and me being here for a shorter time than any. I think about what I've seen our children go through just since I've been here, and we can say Satan's fighting for our families and for our church, for our kids. For our kids are our future, guys. They're the future of the church, of our country, of our name, our heritage. What are we leaving them? Just like when Moses passed this on to Joshua, both lessons, God taught that together so perfect this morning. Are we doing what Moses did and putting our hands on the next generation, the next leaders, and preparing them to be great leaders? Or are we so wrapped up in the perilous times that we're not doing that? Moses knew it was coming to an end, and he still took time to teach Joshua. The world we live in today, and that's what we're going to focus on because we're in it in the present, we face moral issues. We face spiritual issues, social issues, definitely political issues, national issues as a country, international issues as a world that's becoming closer to one. We face international trouble. We face darkness. Darkness meaning a turning away from the light. That's a turning away from God. We face the turning away from God's word, God's morals, God's standards that built many a good men, as we might say. We look at men. I look at elders in my life, and I'll be honest with you. I'll look at them and I'll say to myself, God, don't make them like that anymore. God made man all the same. The times were different, but the way I look at an elder, and you think of someone, and they can be whatever age you want them to be, but when they said they were going to do something, they did it. They stood for something. The storm blew around them, and they stood still. That's when I think of an elder. That's what I think of. Those kind of men seem to be rare this day. Look at our country and look at other countries, and if you just get on the news, or if you got a smartphone, it comes to you. Nations are collapsing from the inside out. No more are things causing nations to collapse. Nation isn't causing another nation to collapse the way it happened in, say, the 40s. No, it's eternal, or internal, I'm sorry. It's from the inside out, okay? There's bleeding on the inside. I want to think about this. I can't remember. There's a couple of Olympics ago, the Winter Olympics, when they were in Korea. We have seen communist nations collapse. We've seen a few that are still around that maybe seem to be going the way of going away from that. And we look at it and we say, that's great. Should never been anyway, because we're free and we can say that. But we'll say that and we're like, the Christian part of it should say, that's great. Now it will be easier to take the gospel to that country, okay? And this hit me out of the blue. Maybe, just maybe, it's happening to set the stage for globalism. Can that communist or those two communist countries exist when we become one world, one government? No. So when it goes on and you see it fall, because it will, understand perilous days are here. It's going to happen quick for the one world leader. Not only will that have to happen, I do believe the country that we're in will have to fall. And I believe she's started the descent. And I'm not trying to be negative. I love our country. Do not mistake patriotism for honesty here. God is ordained or has ordained the working of things all around us, and oftentimes we get so caught up in our own little world that we do not understand what God's doing and what God's allowing. I see these things happening and I fear. Knowing what God is doing and knowing what has to come to pass, and yet I still get scared because I'm like, what am I thinking? My kids. That's what I'm thinking. Or your kids, our next generation, the kids that are in here today. Look at my pew. I never thought when I joined here that Derek's kids would sit with me. They ran from me. Anderson's my girl. That's our future. We don't want to see them struggle like we did. I mean, each generation tries to do what we try to set the next generation up so they don't struggle like we did. We try to leave them something, pass it on. So when we see these things happening, when we realize and we're like, oh, so these are perilous days, we have to be different. Our reaction can't be the same as our neighbors. Our reaction has to be, well, this God's in control. He's ordained these things. It's His will. And I don't know how far we're going to get today. Let's look at verse 2. It says, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, and unholy. I'm bad about reading this and saying, wow, yeah, that's it. But to be honest with you, these are the same problems that man has faced since the fall. The difference is, and this is the lesson in a nutshell, they're proud of it now. Okay? So let's try to break. We're probably just going to stay in this verse. Let's break this down. It says, for men shall be lovers of their own selves. What's the focus of the time that we live in today? In 2019, what's mankind's focus? So I tried to make this relevant to everybody. And I don't know that I did. But in the 60s and the 70s, you had the hippies and the yuppies, right? Socially minded, living for freedom, helping others see that they have been denied of something. Let's set them free. Let's liberate them. That was the mindset then. Set your women free. They're no longer to be slaves to the man. Set our troops free. Set your mind free. You've been in bondage your whole life. Be free. Do what you want. Well, that started it. And I know we've said this, and we're going to say it about 10 more times a day. The enemy that we face is patient. Okay, remember that. We're not. We're not going to set a trap and leave it for 60 years. Our enemy, totally good with that. So we're going to jump from the 60s and 70s, and we're going to move to the 90s and the early 2000s, something I can relate with. And this is mankind's total fall, but it really came out to me when I was in this age. Anti-establishment, no authority needed. We don't need you. We don't care what you have to say. You know what was cool when I was growing up? Not to care. Some of you are like, yeah, I remember those days. It was cool not to care. Okay, you had on your baggy pants, and listen to your alternative rock. Those are the times we grew up in. What about today? I'll tell you what, and I may be completely wrong because I wasn't in the 60s and 70s. But even with that mindset, if someone was in need, they helped. Okay? We see that change. I mean, there was a whole lot that went on in the 90s. I can't really say that about it whenever I was a child. But even then, whenever people were crazy and there was things going on, and I'm sure the preachers at that point in time were like, yeah, perilous days are here. Man still loved man and cared. We see no natural affection, and we're going to get into that later. I just give a little bit away, but people are living for themselves and for themselves alone, as if Jesus Christ never lived or died ever this day and time. Okay? I believe then, and when I say then, I mean 50 years ago, and people were doing those things in the back of their mind. They were like, what was the saying? What was it? Peace, love, They knew it. You don't see that now. I believe that even then they knew it was wrong. People then, and I'm going to say then, from the 60s to maybe the early 90s, lived as if the Bible is more of a suggestion than a law when they were doing those things. The Bible's not even a suggestion now. It's just something that keeps us from moving forward as mankind. That's the way we're looking at it. Mankind, that's the way man looks at it. The time that we live in is you only live once. This is the only life you got. Do what you want. What makes you happy? Do what you want to do. Don't let anything slow you down. Dare I say, not even your own family. That's the days we're living in. the day that we're living in today, things are convenient and easy. I mean, you think about the technology we have, we should be less busy than we are. We should be less busy in 2019 than we were in 1970. We're more busy now than we've ever been. We're more distracted by the things we have. Our focus is off. Christians are guilty of that. True believers are guilty of that. Sin is more accepted now. Parents are so focused on jobs or other stuff or social status or social media status, their children are suffering. Well, I'll get to fixing supper in a minute, or I'll get to doing this in a minute. You know what I heard growing up being preached at? TV's not to be a babysitter. Now the TV's on, the tablet's out, the phone's going, and something else, electronics, probably making noise in the background. That's the time we live in. Full distraction. Let's just call spade a spade. It's the parents' fault. My fault. I'm guilty of that. Okay? You know, if you're in here and you got an iPhone, it tells you your screen time's up. At the end of every week, it gives you your screen time. And I was on my phone a lot last week, and I was listening to a lot of songs on YouTube. It said my screen time was up 65% from normal. You know, normally I average like an hour to 2 hours of screen time a week, and it was up 65%. What if we had screen time for our Bible? And I know that sounds cheesy, but what if it was like, hey, your Bible time was down 85% last week because you were a little too distracted with what was going on in your life, trying to make a living. And then that next week, it's like, hey, good job, you recovered. Screen time, Bible time up 100%. If you were in the Bible, and this is something I've heard before, if you were in the Bible as much as you run your phone, man alive, you'd be a scholar. But you're not. That's a priority problem. It's the time we live in. If you're in here today and you got a phone, guess what? You can get on it, and any kind of sin you want, and I do mean any kind of sin that you desire, is one click away. It's the time we live in. It's the perilous days. This is something that's happened since probably the 60s, and I'm going to talk about it, and I don't know that it's my place, but I've been reading about some things. Feminism. I'm all for you being free. It don't matter what I think. You need to get in the Word. I'm not even going to debate that. It's a God said, not a I said. But I do think that I see it, the whole, it's my body, it's my choice. That ain't right. People use abortion as birth control. That's disgusting. You know, and I'm not trying to make, when you look at a child, that's as close to perfect as man will be on this earth. And man themselves don't even respect that. This generation or these times, and I'm going to say feminism again, I can do what I want when I want, even if it's murder in God's eyes. Destroy love. Love is looked at as an institution, and that's a problem. I was telling them this morning, I got a book at home called The Devil's Diary, and it's about Adolf Hitler and one of his right-hand men. And in World War II, he recorded everything Hitler did for 10 years. This book was lost, and they just found it in the early 2000s in Canada. Do you know what Hitler did to justify to the people his persecution of the Jews? He took away their humanity, meaning he had them relabeled as Jews and not people. When we talk about the institution of love, and I don't say marriage, I said love, we're putting something on love that doesn't need to be there, because love is God-given. The world looks at love as approval, and it's not. The world says that love promotes vulnerability. And I'm going to tell you, I think we're all guilty of that. Because when you love like you should, you're vulnerable. But it's great. the days that we live in and this, and I'm talking about feminism again, it says we don't need that because we don't need to be labeled as weak. We don't need to be the weaker vessel. That's fine. That's the way you look at it. I told you last, I'm not going to guilt somebody over something. Let God convict them. It says we don't need to depend on anyone. We don't need to depend on our husbands or any man. This is the perilous days. Women ask themselves, why devote our energy to others? We need to focus on ourselves. Everything you see on TV, this is where the Mennonites got it right because I had one of them bite into me. I was listening to sports radio. He said the manipulation on your commercials alone, I can't stand it. You turn on the TV, it's about me. Do this for me. Do this for yourself. You deserve this. You deserve a break. You deserve to go. The entitlement in our world is unreal. And I'm talking about the feminism right now. It says, why devote our energy to others? We need to be focused on selves. You do what makes you happy, what makes you feel good. Take time for yourself. You deserve a break. Don't worry about your family, your children, or your husband. Just focus on you. And that's fine. You do need time to yourself. Everybody needs a break. Jesus sat down and rested every once in a while. You know, the way our laws are set up, and I'm not, women raise our children when there's a divorce. Used to, if there was a divorce, everybody looked at the man like he messed up because the woman stood her. She stood still in the storm. The man did something. The man ran out. The man did this. It's not that way anymore. These are the times we live in. And why are they like they are? You know, we something happens and I want to know why. And I was telling Mark this, you know, whenever I go through something this last 3 or 4 weeks, I want to know why. Not why God's allowing it to happen. What can I take away from it? What did I do to deserve it? You know, is this because of something I did when I was 14? Do I have, you know, why is this going? I want to know why. I have questions, and I've always thought questions are good because at least I'm paying attention. I need to get an answer. Well, we want to know why these things are going to. Why is this being accepted? If I if something's going on with my kids or I do something to them, I do want them to ask me why. I want to be honest with that. I don't feel like there's anything wrong with asking why. Hold your place here, and let's turn to Matthew chapter 24. Verse 11. It says, Matthew 24, verse 11, it says, and many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. False prophets stuck out to me. There's a lot more feel-good churches out there, a lot more Joel Osteens in the world, it seems, than there are Mark Clarks or Brother Cantus or Brother Pages. It seems like the enemy's numbers are always greater than ours. We don't need numbers. God's taught against numbers in the entire word. He says we don't need numbers. But there's a lot of false prophets, and I'm not saying that, you know, we're the only true church. We know that's not the case. If it was, what a huge responsibility that would be. And I'm not saying, you know, there's people saved that are who knows where. You know, that's for God to know. It's not for me to know. I don't need to deny it. If somebody says that, pray for them. God will deal with it. I can't. I'm saved by grace. I'm no different than anybody else. I'm no better than anybody else. But verse 12, it says, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. No love for one another. A lack of love that we see today, even in homes. You know, I guess I'm not, talking to everybody in here with kids now at home. I'm no better than you. I don't know any more than you do. But your kids have bad days, just like you and me. And when they come home, it should be a shelter for them. They're dealing with stuff that we didn't deal with growing up. I mean, they should have a sanctuary home knowing that there's going to be love and forgiveness there no matter what. Okay? Yeah, we're going to stand our ground. We're going to stand on the word, but we're going to do it God's way, not what comes natural to us. Okay? So when we read that verse where love waxes cold, it never waxes cold at home. Okay? And I'm guilty. I'm talking to myself. But we see that in the world today, parents aren't loving their kids like they're supposed to. Kids aren't loving their parents like they're supposed to. Sin seems to be abounding everywhere. A general love that mankind has for other people has waxed cold because we only care about ourselves more so than ever. Turn back to 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy 3 again, let's look at verse 2. It says, "For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous." Boy, this describes our day and time probably more than anything. That I want what they have, I'm gonna go get it. I want his wife, I'm gonna go get her. So what are people living for today? Status, self, lies, social media, trying to make yourself look better in a fake world. Look at what I've accomplished, look at what I've done, and mommy and daddy probably paid for half of it, and I ain't getting into that. But things, materials are making them happy. People are living for what they can get or gain, not what they can do or give. I want to repeat that. People are living for what they can get or gain, not for what they can do or give. We're not giving like we should. That's where the entitlement comes in. I heard this message preached. I can't take credit for what's being said here, but it was a message about learning to be content. And the preacher said the Bible teaches we are to worship God. The Bible teaches that we are to love people. And the Bible teaches that we are to use things. And he was talking about money. So we are to love God, or we are to worship God, love people, and use things. He said we got it so messed up because we're even teaching our children now to ignore God, to love things, and to use people. He said we've mixed it all up. Covetousness. The reason we get up and go to work isn't to gain more stuff. We got enough stuff. I throw stuff away every day. I need to clean out more stuff now. The reason I get up and go to work, to me, any more time or money is time to me. The more I have, the more time I can take off. And I know that's wrong to look at it like that. But I don't need more stuff. I want more time at home. I said it up here before. I'm in the best days. My kids are still at home. I want to be there as much as I can be. I don't need stuff to be at home. I think it was Glenda that said it at lunch. She said, when you go through something like that, you're just thankful to be feeling good. And that's a great statement. I'm thankful to have health. I'm thankful my kids are in here today and my wife is. That's something. That's not stuff. That's something real. We're not to be covetous of others. We're not to be covetousness of this world. In these perilous times, when things seem to be growing out of control, we're not to be looking around saying, well, I could make money on this. I could invest in this and I could probably come out ahead. We're to be sticking to what God has us to do in the last days, and that's look for his return and try to tell as many people as we can about what Jesus Christ did for us. Let's keep reading in 2 Timothy 3:2. It says, "For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, and proud." We'll do these two. Boasters and proud, we'll do them together. I believe it's a mankind continually boasts or brags of its own accomplishments. We always have. And we do it individually, even if we don't realize we're doing it. Sometimes by the way we walk, by the way we talk, by what we drive, by where we live. It's a look at me and what I've done for myself, not a, man, God's blessed me. I tell you what, I started out with nothing, and look what has happened. After all the stuff I've been through, after all the mistakes I've made, God really put me somewhere I don't deserve to be here. That's not natural for man. Mankind says, look, we've landed on the moon. Look, we discovered where we came from dirt and mud. Look, we can clone God's creation. That's what man says. You know, if you go out and talk to certain people in these perilous days, it seems like they're happy to be strutting to hell. They're doing it with a proud walk, being boasters. And sometimes I fell there because I look at them, I'm like, well, walk on, buddy. And it should break my heart that they're doing it. In perilous days, man, the proud boasting man, thinks he's too good or too smart to be judged by God. I've got so much education. I know better than that. That's just silly. That's the old way of thinking. What's wrong with the old way? If it, if it worked then, it works now, right? Overeducation. I know who said it. He said there ain't no idiot like an educated idiot. We're putting faith in our own knowledge instead of what God's given us, okay? But the sad thing is a lot of Christians have that same mindset. The way mankind treats each other every day changes rapidly. It seems like it's coming apart at the seams. You get this whole anti-bullying thing going on with kids and all this, and yet there's probably more going on this day and time. The harder you fight against it, the more it fights back, sort of thing. But it seems like everybody's trying to fix these problems, thinking it's going to make it better. It's been a sin problem from day one. It's not a we can finger point at this or finger point at that. No, it's us. Let's look in the mirror and let's get real about it. That's the days we're living in. Nobody wants to look in the mirror. So man's proud and they're boasters. Man's always wanted to have something to do with their own salvation. You can see that throughout Scripture. That's pride. I got to have something to do with this. I got to fix this. I need to do something. I can't just accept it. That's pride. Swallow your pride and do it God's way. Let's keep reading for time's sake. We're going to move on. Let's see, we're up to blasphemers now. Boasters, proud blasphemers. Blasphemer, blasphemy. Someone who mocks God. Someone who's, I dare you. I'm going to do it my way, how I want. I dare you. They're daring. And like Brother Matt said, that Brother Derek said this morning, it's going to be a sad day one day. I say this and don't judge me. I look at our country and sometimes I'm just so ashamed. I'm thankful to be here. Don't get me wrong. 36, and from where I've seen it go, from the time that I was old enough to remember to where it is now, it's went fast. The world is looking at us because we are the free world. We're the free country, okay? I mean, we're the greatest country. Look at everything we've done. Look at everything we've given the world, right? And the world's looking at us, and people are visiting our country, and what do they see when they're here? men walking down the street holding each other's hands. Pornography everywhere, nakedness everywhere. What they see is that we're not ashamed of that sin. We're like, look at me, blasphemy, God, this is the way I want to live. You know, Satan wants to destroy our country now because of its foundation, not because we're still going in a godly way. He's mad that we're still rooted in what our Constitution says. Try to change it every day. You know, there's other people in the Middle East who want to destroy our country. You know why they want to destroy our country? It's not always because we're so Bible based and believing in Jesus. They hate our country a lot of the time because of the things that we're allowing to go on. The homosexuality, for one. They want to come over here and destroy it because of that. They don't want to spread to their side. Think about that. We have become that. Perilous days are here. And don't get discouraged in anything today. God's in control. The same God who was there showing Adam and Eve, hey, you failed, this is your redemption, is the same God who's going to come and judge then and now. We see pornography and profanity on your smartphone. It's there at your fingertips. It's on your computer. It's on your TV. There's commercials on TV now that wouldn't have been allowed to air 30 years ago. I mean, it's crazy. But you know what our adversary does? He gives it to us just a little bit at a time, until all of a sudden we don't see the big picture and we step back and we're like, wait a minute, did they just say that on TV? When did that happen? But it's the days we're living in. He's patient. Well, you can start by saying this, and then you can say this, or you can start by showing a little leg here with this, and then, oh, wait a minute. Oh, let's let Victoria's Secret have her own little thing on TV for a while. He's patient. The thing is we see all these problems in our world, thinking of perversions. When somebody's sitting there looking at something on their phone or computer screen, one day looking at it, it's not going to be enough. They're going to go out and do something about it. And we wonder why. Because it's legal for them to do. You can't just, I told Roger, I said, you start looking at a truck, buddy, you're going to buy one. It's just a matter of time. Same thing with anything else. It's like buying cheap bread, Tyler. You don't buy cheap bread. I'm just here to tell you today. Perilous days are here. Enjoy your bread while you can. Marriages are broken because of pornography. Okay? Let's just get real in here today. Because the reality you're living in isn't going to be like the fantasy world you were watching. Okay? We don't understand that. Mankind these days, we think we're so smart this day and time. And I'm saying we because I'm a sinner just like anybody else. There's going to be a hunger there that cannot be filled. The profanity, the language, the homosexuality are being pushed down our throats on commercials, on children's shows, on cereal commercials. I mean, on commercials, we're dealing with this. They're trying to sell me something. I have no choice but to buy it, but they're going to make me watch their two gay guys try to sell it to me. The cussing, the way people dress on these children's shows. You know, when Andy Griffith came out, you know what the problem was? Otis is a drunk. We can't let our kids watch that. Now it's the best thing on TV. What's happened? I dream about being a sheriff and not having nothing to do all day but pick on Barney, you know? I tell you the problem is I get Fox News updates on my phone, okay? And I normally wouldn't click on this, but because of the headline, it says Harvard professor goes off on teachers. I'm like, okay. So I click on it. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. We've heard of Harvard University, and some Dr. Pierce out there was lecturing 2,000 teachers. He has respect because of the awesome degree he has from the awesome college. I'd love for my kid to go to Harvard. That's awesome. But he says this to them while he has their ear. This is his words. I won't quote it, okay? And I'll tell you when the quote's over. He says, every child in America who enters school at the age of 5 is mentally ill because they enter school with an allegiance toward elected officials. They enter school with allegiance wanting to learn about their founding fathers and the institutions of their government. They enter school because they want to preserve the land that they live in and the free form of government that they have. They enter school because they're being taught at home patriotism, sovereignty, and nationalism. He goes on to say all this or all of that proves that the child is sick because the truly well individual, and listen to this part, the truly well individual is one who has rejected all those things, and this is where it gets real to us, and is what I would call a true international child of the future, end quote. Does that sound like one world government to you? We look at what Japan's doing. They're so highly, we got to copy this, we got to do that. So focused on other people, we're letting our own country fall apart. He said that. He didn't say it to people who can't. He said that to teachers. Teachers. Now, whether they act on it, I don't know. God's in control. Don't listen to that and get discouraged because it makes you sick. God's in control. Did you ever think you'd hear of the day when an American could say that in America? I guarantee you, my dad. I guarantee you, Roger didn't. Who is being chastised this day and time? God's people. Who's always been chastised throughout history? God's people. A love for parents, or a fixed standard in the home, a teaching in the home of what's right and wrong, a belief in our wonderful free country that so many men died for, and he says they're sick. You know, I thought about this. I went to the same elementary school that both of my sons go to or went to, and there's a flagpole out in the circle, and I remember like fighting to be able to go out there and raise it and lower it and learning how to fold a flag. I remember saying the Pledge of Allegiance under God every morning before school started, and they took all that away. Well, why did they take it away? Well, I'll tell you why. In 1980, I did a lot of Googling last night. I started on some NRA websites. I started with school shootings. I was trying to get a lot of facts for today. So if I'm not here next week, I probably got arrested. But in 1980, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a Kentucky statute. This is personal. That had mandated every public school classroom have it posted on the walls, talking about the Ten Commandments. Satan patiently sat by, planted seeds, and waited for victory. Now, I'll say that, and I mean that. And I'll say it, and then I'll follow it up with, but God was in control. These things have to come to pass. Understand that. We're living in perilous days, but they have to be perilous days. Schools have liberal teaching on homosexuality, on abortion, on birth control. Schools teach bad morals, and my kids go to public school, you know. So schools soak children in an indulgence of sin. Teaching on the Bible is banned. Witches, antichrist, this type of thought mentality of, you know, anything but God, more or less, is all of a sudden welcomed. It's well, as long as it's not God, we'll accept it. That's the attitude. But it's not just in our schools. It's on TV. It's everywhere. You know, even parents, I believe, who live by a set of morals or character that aren't even necessarily belief or Bible based, or seeing things going on, they're like, wow, things have really changed lately. You know, have you noticed what's going on? Things have changed. Little Susie, she's acting different, you know. But they find it more difficult even this day and time to send their kids to school with a stranger. They're scared of what's going to happen. You know, our children need a lot of prayer because they're growing up in perilous days. And we thought we were. but we were mistaken because we're still here. But again, I say God is in control. Let's look at one more. Disobedient to parents. You know, I ask this because so many times when we read that, we think of our young kids. We think of Madison, who just made eye contact with me. We think of our young kids. It's what about little nursing homes? Let's think about that. Let's get real about it. They're full. People don't want to deal with their own family. They're overfilled. I'm not saying there's not a need for it when you can't take care of that person. I'm not saying that, okay? Understand that. But I'm just saying, just because it's inconvenient for you doesn't mean that's the right move to make. Sometimes you need to be made inconvenient to get real about what's going on. How many times on the news lately, like in the last couple of years that you can remember, have you seen where a child killed or beat, stole from their own parents? I heard a story the other day. This woman's house I was working in, she had a bad car wreck and her son was on drugs. He came in and stole everything out of her house and sold it while she was in the hospital recovering. Her own son. Used to be like, you don't talk about my mama, you know? And now it's like, no, you don't steal from her, I do. That's the time we're living in. How many teenagers this day and time just have no respect for their parents? They don't have any fear. Well, it's because they don't let us put fear on them anymore, right? Let me tell you, kids in here, try to call the cops on your parents. You'll get a beating before they get there. It's coming. I'm not saying take pride in whipping your kids. Nobody wants, I don't want to whip my kids. You don't want to whip your kids. It's not fun. It's a broken fellowship. But we have to do it, or else they're going to end up like everybody else. The reason that God has made us to give them is what's going to separate them in perilous days. It's what's going to stick with them for their life. We see kids who never move out, who never grow up because they're living for themselves. I can mooch off dad a little bit like, you're 40, get out, you know. You make $9 an hour, do something else. I don't know. Maybe you just want too much stuff. You don't need stuff. Come to church and listen. That's disobedient to your parents. Let them enjoy the end of their days, you know? Let them move on. I blame that on the parents. Should have been harder on them. Should have made them work. Or if they didn't get it and just didn't take, tough love gets tougher later on in life. We'll see who's tougher. See who's more stubborn. Tougher is not a word, is it? We see kids this day and time who mooch off their parents, you know, because they're just too lazy to try. And I do believe there's parents out there who did a great job and it just didn't take. You know, I'm not saying that it's always the case. But not just being disobedient to parents, but I believe our society has a complete lack for elders. We don't respect people who've been there and done that. We don't respect those war vets who fought old school on foreign beaches. Man, what men, huh? What men? They were men. You know, if an elder talks, we should shut up and listen because they've got something to say and they've been through it and we hadn't. I don't care if it's an elder of the church or just some old guy outside the door here. If he's got something to say, listen to what he's got to say. Respect him. That's going to give God honor and glory. We don't see that anymore. It's not being taught. We're not. You don't see people teaching their kids to hold doors for somebody else or to do the right things in life. If you see something needs to be done, just do it. Just do it. You know what? And I think I've said this before. I'm sorry I repeat myself so much when I'm up here. When Stephanie and I got married, the guy who married us, I loved him. And he wanted to talk to us because he knew I'd been living like a dog. And he said, Jason, Stephanie, he said, people get divorced over money. So they didn't cause a divorce this day and time. He said, I want you to listen closely to what I got to say. Okay, yeah, sure. Sounds good. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, you're not going to start off with what you left home with. He said, your parents struggled. You're going to struggle. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be easy. You're not going to have a 3-story house full of furniture. You're not going to have the nicest clothes or the newest cars. But it's okay. You want to start with what you left with, and you can't. You never saw what your parents went through because you didn't know them before you. And we started off a little different than everybody else, and that's fine. But we're still together. Maybe mankind is the same. Maybe we as men are the same. But we can all agree that the times are different. The atmosphere around us is changing. Sin is more tolerated than ever. The time we live in is different than it was when I was born in 1983, or the time that Brother Roger grew up in, being good old boys out doing stuff. Every older person I know talks of, well, we went to school and we had guns in the back window of our truck. Nobody ever thought about killing anybody. In this day and time, if you go to school with a too sharp of a pencil, they're going to throw you in jail. Because what? Man's sick. We're sick. Man, we got to pray for our kids. That's all I can take away from this. Our kids, our grandkids, the future of our church. I mean, that's one thing I think we don't do in our prayer bands. You know, we pray. You know, we'll pray for hours at a time. But I failed in praying for the future of this church. And the future of this church is children and whoever God's going to bring into it. Again, we'll close out. Don't be discouraged in what you've heard today, because God's in control, and it's got to come to pass. Okay, these things that are going on all around us, I get on the news, I see it, and it makes me sick. I see things that my own kids have went through. You hear stories, and it's like it hurts when you hear it. You know, you hurt for others. You're like, man, I hate that for them. I wish we didn't have to deal with this, but we do. It's the days we live in. But our response and how we stand as the storm's coming. Imagine this great storm coming, and we're standing hand in hand, counting on Christ. That's how we're supposed to deal with perilous days. We're not supposed to take and run and tuck tail like everybody else or get involved in what they're getting in. The things that we have, listen, we spend, think about this in closing. We spend so much time trying to gain stuff that we can't take with us. If we would take that time and just invest it in someone else, as Tyler said this morning, that's a blessing that's going to live longer than us. That's leaving behind a legacy. That's Moses-like. That means something. Thank you for your attention, Brother Derek. I'll stand and grab a handful.
Turn over 155.